On the panel today, we're just going to go down the line and give me 1 minute. That'll take 10 minutes. Give me 30 seconds on who you are and what your restaurants are and background. So, Andy, you want to start up?
Sure. I'm Andy Shalal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets and Edenville Restaurant.
Perfect.
Michael Babin, it's a neighborhood restaurant group, which is Evening Star Cafe, Vermilion, Tallulah, Birch and Barley, Church Key, Rustico, and Buzz.
Oh, you took more than 30 seconds.
Sorry.
Nora Pouillon, chef owner of Restaurant Nord, the first certified organic restaurant in the country.
I think that's worthy of a round of applause. The first certified. She was doing it when we weren't even thinking about it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Sternberg. I'm currently proprietor of Harry's Taproom, but it will soon become Market Taverns.
Mike Curtin, DC Central Kitchen.
Ellen Kassoff-Gray, Equinox Restaurant, Watershed Restaurant, Muse at the Corcoran Gallery of Art, and 2 catering companies.
Goodness, what do you do in your spare time?
Hang out with him.
Good idea.
I'm just going to ditto that one. We're through the same. Yes.
You can take your name.
What you have assembled.
Todd Gray. Yes, I'm Todd.
What you have assembled here is one of the preeminent restaurant groups from Washington, D.C., and I have to thank Andrew and the rest of the organization, Animal Welfare, for getting these people up here today. It's quite a challenge. Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate it. I want to start this off because I'm starting to get upset, not that I ever get upset, but I'm starting to get upset about the lack of understanding that exists in restaurant community between restaurateurs and chefs about what these damn things, these definitions really mean, and how we go about ensuring that the products that we're buying really meet our definitions. And I'm going to just backtrack for 1 second and give you a definition of sustainable so that we can use this as a platform to jump off from. Most of you have heard definitions of sustainability before, but for purposes of this discussion, if a cattle farm is going to be sustainable, in my opinion of a lot of others, I didn't invent this definition, but at first, the farm has to be economically sound. It's got to be able to stay in business, just like any business. If a business is going to be sustainable, it's got to be economically sound. It's got to be profitable, has to be able to move forward on a continuum. Secondly, it has to be environmentally sound, which means that it's regenerative in its use of resources on the planet, so that the planet is left in no worse shape and hopefully better shape as the result of the production practices that that business uses. Third, a sustainable business has to be one that is humane in its treatment of its animals, and I include in its treatment of animals the fourth part of the sustainability quotient, which is humane in its treatment of its workforce and its contribution to the community in which it is located. Based on that definition, those 4 points of the definition of sustainability, I'm going to put Nora on the spot first. How do you know that the products that you've been buying for the last 30 years are sustainable?
Well, I go and visit the farm. I go to the farm. First of all, now that I'm certified, I can only use farmers that are also certified. And they're inspected every year. The standards and the rules are quite strict, and I need to have their certificate, and I have to believe in that certificate. It's given by the USDA, a third-party certifier. And I visit the farms too to make sure that you know, everything else is okay, how they treat the animal, how are they really free range, what does he feed them, you know, I just make sure, once a year I visit my farmers. And I think for me that's enough. I mean, if luckily I have enough farmers locally that I can visit and pass the certificate, that's enough for me. Thank you.
Todd and Ellen, how do you ensure that your products are truly sustainable products?
Like you said, it's a broad definition, I think.
Yeah.
And I think half of being, well, 80% of being a great restaurant is having great suppliers and building trust and relationships with those suppliers and sort of seeing the face of your farmer. And I mean, he can answer to this, but many of them pull right up and you can tell where people come from. I used to work for Cisco, the largest food distributor in the country.
Right.
So I've seen both sides of it. You can definitely tell when meat comes from a smaller.
So, I mean, you know, and just what Nora, I mean, it's much what Nora's saying. I mean, I see suppliers out here that I buy from. I mean, these are people that you build long-term relationships with. You know their families. You know where they are. You know their business. They know our business. You're connected, and we depend on them to assure us that everything that they're doing. And like Nora says, we, on our free time, and we're all not doing our businesses and the 80 hours that we all work a week, we try to stay out and go and see our farmers and meet the people that we're buying from, and that's what we have to do.
Andy, how important do you think that independent third-party certifications are in this process of assuring yourself that you're getting the products that are truly sustainable?
I don't think anything can substitute the visit to the farm. I have to agree with the other people, with Nora and Todd and Ellen. I think you would be surprised to see what the definition of free range is. I saw what free range chickens look like, and they are not free, and there's no range out there at all. So I just want to be clear of that. So you know, having gone to, for example, to Grayson Farms, I saw what grass-fed, open, beautiful space looks like, where the animals are cared for. So that's really, I think, I don't think anything can substitute that. But short of that, I think a certification process is necessary for us to be able to kind of adhere to a certain standard. There are organizations now that are certifying not just restaurants, but businesses, like B Corp right now is a certification process that's actually audited, where you're audited to see whether what you say you do is actually what you do. Whether it deals with staffing, how you treat your employees, how you procure your food, how you maintain some sort of environmental standards, and how you clean your product, how you clean your spaces, and so on. So there are ways now, I think, that are developing that are allowing consumers to be the final arbiters, and I think some of them are pretty good certification processes. Like I said, B Corp is one of them.
Michael, certification program important?
Not at all. I agree with everybody. I think it's all about your own personal relationships with the growers. You know, we've dealt with a lot of Amish farmers over the years, and the last thing an Amish farmer wants is a government inspector coming to his farm to tell him what he has or can or cannot do. So it's just not important to them, and it's much more important that, you know, especially with the Amish, it's the relationship, their relationship with God. It's like the kosher hot dog. They report to a higher authority, you know.
So that's their certification, right?
That's right.
There you go. There you go. That's good. Anybody else want to add anything?
But, you know, it's not to take distributors out of the mix. Not everybody can, having spent time distributing 10 years doing that, not everybody can buy directly from a farmer and has the time to develop these relationships, and then there's multi-property, you know, units that you have to get food to. So you don't want to be unrealistic and say, okay, everybody buy direct from a farmer. Farmers can't handle all that accounting and all that storage and moving things around the country. So there is ways of making distributors fall into the model, I think, that we're all hoping to achieve in this country. I don't want to use the word sustainable, because I think that's open to interpretation, but distributors can be part of it too.
Mike?
I think that third-party certifications are really important to the general public. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of promising things happen at the grocery store that, as a result of people who don't have a tremendous amount of time to delve into these issues, making split decisions about the food that they buy for themselves and their families. But I think for the people up here, it's important that we go beyond the certification, look into the certification, understand what does it really mean, what does it not mean, and do the things that we need to do, like go to the farms, check them out, and help educate the public. Because as soon as a certification gains market meaning, as soon as it's a perceived value that people are willing to pay for, inevitably it becomes a little bit of a football for moneyed interests. Which is something that's happened with organic, I think, and any certification that actually gets traction is probably, you know, you have to watch it and make sure that it stays true.
So I'll throw Andrew under the bus. So the animal welfare approved certification doesn't hold a lot of strength with you as a group. I'm just putting it out there.
No, I think that holds a lot of weight to me. It does, yeah.
So, and I'm just, you know, I'm just trying to glean a little more knowledge personally from this. When you go out to a farm, if it doesn't have an animal welfare approved or a humane animal treatment, you're there, you see the cattle, you know, out in the pasture, you know, they all seem to be alive. There's no, you know, nobody's limping around or bleeding. You know, are you convinced then that that animal is being humanely treated? I mean, how do you know?
That's a really good question. No, I mean, for me, I think the answer is no, and it just depends on how far, you know, as a restaurateur, you know, you have a moral obligation. Everybody, I think, involved in this system, everybody who's eating has a moral obligation. As soon as you know, there's a reason why they keep all of what's happening to these animals behind closed doors. Yep. But when you're feeding a whole lot of people, it's magnified, it's multiplied. Sure. So you want to take it as far as you can, and I think animal welfare certification is very meaningful. It's important.
What about the production practices? And I'm going to get away from meat for 1 second, but what about the production practices on produce and things like that? You know, we're finding that there's some difficulties in buying produce that hasn't been properly chilled or properly handled and getting it from farm to table. Do you feel that there's liabilities out there that you're willing to accept to be able to buy from a small producer, or do you want to have a middleman distributor or some consolidation practice in between you and the grower to ensure that you're getting high quality product that's not going to be injurious to your staff? Michael?
Well, this Michael? We got three of them here. Okay.
It's hard. I thought this was your sweet spot here.
I think this goes back to, the answer is yes, of course. And I think this goes back to something that you mentioned this morning. And one of the barriers that we find, and you know, being a recovering restaurateur myself, I understand this is, the time is the biggest asset that we don't have, right? And you know, I think you said you got to make it easy for the restaurants, right? And from your perspective, that third-party certification is that which does that. Now, this Michael and I have talked a lot about doing more of that. We're doing some aggregating and some food hub work. That's what Michael started with Arcadia. And we see a role for us as being the group that could do that. Now, we do a lot with Mennonites. We're not going to get into a lot of government certification. We're not going to get into government certification. But just like using donated food many, many years ago when people said that can't be done, we wanted to make sure that we were doing it. Could be done, but we wanted to make sure we were doing it in the safest way possible. So we probably have, feeding 10,000 people a day, we probably have a bigger risk than most restaurateurs in this room. And so we have to be crazy careful about that. And then to take that one step further, even if it's just with produce, which we assume is a little safer, we can't be casual about that at all. And then it goes back to the relationships that we have with the folks up on this table and many of the other of our colleagues in the room. But it's important, absolutely. But I think what we really need to do is figure out a way where it is not onerous. But we need to create a system where chefs don't need to visit a farm or the farm all the time. Nothing can replace that, absolutely. We do it. But it's something that we need to get a level of comfortability with, where we can all trust one another and work with these growers that we trust.
You know, I want to say that there's the NOSB, the National Organic Standard Board, which is an organization that just checks all the time that the rulings are kept, as the standards are kept, exactly as they're supposed to be. And that's a way to have, I mean, it sounds weird, but to have a board, inspect the inspector. So that to assure that you can really trust, because if, as you said, if you don't have time to visit the farms, you need to have somebody that basically checks that whatever the farmer says is actually really happening.
So for you, the organic certification has really been your guidebook
Yeah,
on products
but
that you...
and it covers all the things you said, the humane treatment of the animals, the humane treatment even of the farm work. I mean, it covers really everything because it's so. But I mean, they needed also to have a board to, you know, to checks on it if it's really true and if it really keeps up the standard. And many of the things, of course, the government wants to change, and so they're the little police for the government too.
Just from our standpoint, when we walked our walk to try to find a sustainable beef product at 500 pounds a week, we gravitated towards the American Grass-Fed certification because we found it exceedingly difficult to visit all of the properties that were out there and making product available. And I have to tell you, I think that there is a very, very small minority of individuals that are out there in the cattle raising business and in the produce business that will say one thing and do another. And unfortunately, you can see living proof of that in what the giant agribusiness commodity beef producers are trying to use as marketing techniques to try to sell to restaurants. I think that, you know, it's borderline unethical what some of these organizations are doing in defense of the commodity beef program. So I guess it boils down to caveat emptor again. You have to really be aware of what it is that you're buying and try to make sure that you have your safeguards in place to make sure that the product that you're getting is indeed what it is that's being promised, number one, and number two, that it's done in a healthful manner. I want to stop for 1 second because I'm going to change the protocol here a little bit. If you have a question, if we have microphones available, and if not, it doesn't matter. But if you have a question while we're going through this, just raise your hand and we'll you know, you don't have to sit on it for the entire process. So if anybody's got any questions about what we've talked about so far, yes, Chef. I know, he's Chef, I swear.
If you put on your menu that it's Black Angus, Angus Society comes by and tells you to take it off their menu or you're going to be in trouble. Is there nobody that watches over these things?
Well, here, what you're talking about is certified Angus beef, the CAB program. You cannot use that term unless you are in fact buying certified Angus beef. But to use Black Angus, anybody can use that term just about any time. I think in your packet there's a great discussion about the very use of those terms and how misleading they are. And I want to tout this one more time, this food labeling for dummies, because it's my contention that most chefs and restaurateurs out there are dummies when it comes to understanding what the definitions really are and what is in fact a federally regulated term versus a term that has little or no meaning or can be twisted to mean whatever it is the supplier wants. Dan, need to stretch to about 5:15.
Hey, Dan,
All right,
as long as you're
Mike,
looking for filler, as long as you're looking for filler. I was adding on to what Michael was talking about, especially in regards to food safety. I've just spent the last 4 years as president of the restaurant division of a $1 billion food service contracting company, and just left 2 weeks ago to buy back one of my restaurants and go back to being an independent restaurateur. But anyway, what's scary is for the last 4 years, I've been getting recall notices that are sent out to the whole company at the rate of about 24 a week on food items.
That's incredible.
It's absolutely frightening that every Monday you'd get about 4 or 5, and then on Tuesday 3 or 4 more, and Wednesday 3 or 4 more, and it's a variety of products. And so, so here's where the FDA has been involved in watching over these products, and yet there's a huge amount of recalls. Now, granted, some of these are regional, most of them are regional, few of them are national, but it is incredibly frightening. So when we consider that and we consider the cost of not checking out our sources and finding out how they're producing food, it's really amazing.
Scary stuff. Yeah, sure. Hit it.
Yes, it's Angelique Chow from Animal to Meat. So I have kind of a half question, half plea, which is how do you get your staff in restaurants to be able to communicate to customers the truth about what they're getting? And I'll just give an example, which fortunately is not any of your restaurants, but I went to Blue Duck Tavern, which is a very high-end restaurant. The food is really good. They list the farms that they use on their menu, so it's all out there for you to see, and they have veal meatballs on the menu. So I asked the server, is this pink or white veal? She had no idea what I was talking about. And then I asked, well, is it, if it's pasture raised or is it crated, those types of things. She still had no idea. She said, I'll go back to the kitchen. I thought, okay, well, she'll at least get me the answer from the kitchen. She came back and said, oh, it's the very nice veal. It's the good stuff. They do a nice job. Am I supposed to trust that? How do you get your staff to kind of give the right message, and what are your perspectives on that?
Well, I might say something. We do, and I mean, it's I don't know that everybody can do it, but just like we can sit here and talk about this, and we're fortunate enough to have been there and to know these farmers and to know these people and the people that we're buying from. You have to get your staff, and we bring them into the restaurant, and you do staff lineups, and you bring pictures of the farm, and you show them, and when their days off, you say, hey, you guys want to take a ride to the Plains, Virginia?
We quiz them.
And go hang out on a farm and go meet them, and they might hang out, and maybe they have too many beverages and stay in the Plains for the night. Who knows? But it's something that you have to get them to get close to. You have to educate them, obviously.
And also, staff want to work for a restaurant that is responsible in this manner. And our staff is quizzed on a regular basis, written, that they have to know what they're serving comes from and to be able to talk about it. And it is okay to have to run back to the kitchen to get an answer, though. That does happen. But it's our responsibility to teach our staff. So it falls on the management of the restaurant, not the servers as much. The responsibility should be up here.
And I'm sure Brian would be mortified if he heard that question.
You should call him.
I think there's also credibility of the restaurant that if they're claiming to be buying direct from farms and buying quality product, and it's a quality restaurant, there's an integrity to the restaurant that you shouldn't, as a consumer, you shouldn't have to question it. And we shouldn't have to make a big deal about it other than we believe this is the product that tastes best, or,
Here's the issue that I'm facing, and it's a very real issue. I've been doing this sustainable beef in my restaurants for over 2 years now. And just last week, 2 weeks ago, I had to ask the question, is the term antibiotic-free a regulated term? And the answer is no, it's not. And I was confused by it, because how do I go back and determine whether the product that I'm buying is in fact antibiotic-free? Because a lot of people claim with their price. A lot of ranchers are claiming antibiotic-free. We talked about this ionophores issue today. I swear to goodness, do you think 9 out of 10 chefs have ever heard the term ionophore, much less antibiotic? I'm serious, microbial. I mean, these guys are cooks.
Well, and grass-fed can be just grass in their feed. They don't. If you see something's grass-raised, it doesn't mean they're out in a pasture necessarily.
Right.
It is. You do have to be aware of what you're buying, because all they have to do is physically put grass into the feed, and they can call it grass-fed.
Sure, absolutely. So my point about all of this is a well-intentioned chef or restaurateur may, in his heart of hearts, believe that he is selling you pasture-raised veal, and he may be absolutely clueless as to what the truth is about the product that he's serving. And I think this is very dangerous and a problem that we need to move through as we continue to expand what I hope will become a much larger fraction of the sustainable beef industry, that more and more of this comes to light for people to be able to give the right information as opposed to something that's just a guess.
And if I could add, it's okay not to have the answers to everything. I mean, sometimes I think this is a relatively new movement that's taking shape now. And it used to be the word natural was like, considered a good word. Now you see the word natural, you want to run the opposite end, because that usually indicates somebody's trying to pull something over your eye. So I think we have to sort of give a little bit of room. If there's a really good intention on the part of the restaurant trying to move in that direction, we should encourage them. and not try to find flaws in every mistake they make, because there are going to be mistakes. That waiter may have been off that day when those lineups were happening, and and it's possible. I mean, I know that happens. The reality is, restaurants that are really committed to this kind of thing, oftentimes they're doing the best they can, and they need to constantly be coaxed to go further and further and further, as opposed to having this sort of, gotcha kind of approach to this process, because it is so, difficult. I mean, I didn't find out about free-range chickens, that really they weren't free-range till I went to visit. And it wasn't until somebody said, have you looked into your chickens whether they're free-range or not? And I thought, it says free-range. They look happy on the picture, but clearly, when I went finally to visit the farm, I realized that, the terminology is so weird and so uninformative, really. So it's a learning process. So pretty soon, I would hope that there'll be something that'll say, really free range, or something like that, so that the consumer can understand what they're buying as well. Because this group, I imagine, is a very sophisticated group of people. But most people walk in, see natural beef, they think, oh, I'm getting this wonderful, meat from this wonderful space. But the reality is, they may be the complete opposite of what they're expecting.
And this extends not only to beef, but it goes into poultry and eggs and cage-free my you-know-what. I mean, it's nightmare. Go ahead.
One of the issues that I'm talking addressed either is, to my horror, I discovered that USDA certified organic vegetables come from China. How do we answer that?
Yep.
I mean, we go through all this effort to get our certification and then get again from China. Where are we going?
Sure. Think of the food miles there, huh?
I think it's easy to answer. I think because there's such a big demand and big companies like Walmart and Costco want to have organic products too, and there are just not enough organic farmers in this country. And so these big companies made contract with Chinese agricultural businesses that they would bring somebody over to check, to teach them how to be certified organic, and that was the USDA inspection comes in. But it's like with, unfortunately, with everything else, if there's not enough available or not the price range that consumer demand, consumers that go to stores like Walmart and Costco, they want to pay the cheapest possible price. But if you pay the cheapest possible price, it's not enough for an American farmer. It can sustain maybe a Chinese farmer, but it can't sustain an American farmer.
That's why
this happens.
Before we get to this question, I think this brings up a very important topic that hasn't been vetted yet, and that's the intrusion of major players like Costco, like Walmart, into the organic and sustainable market to buy up, Cisco buying up huge tracts of, or contracting for huge tracts of sustainably produced organic produce.
But you leave local out of this. I mean, you're talking about sustainable and organic, but that's only part of it. You have to bring in the local aspect, because that's the only way to guarantee that your organic vegetables are not coming from China, is if they're from Virginia.
Cisco has in place in the Chicago region what's called a Lower Lakes program of sustainable products, that they have their own protocol in place and it's a fairly thorough system of self-certification, of self-monitoring their production to ensure that the products are in fact sustainably grown. But what's to keep them from, it's a huge issue that's starting to develop. You're going to see more and more sustainable and organic product in the Walmarts, in the Costcos. Cisco is buying these products and making them available all over the place. The demand far exceeds the supply. We had a situation in Chicago where it was impossible for local restaurateurs like ourselves to get heirloom tomatoes because they were all going to the farmers markets at premium prices. Tough issues to avoid.
Well, I think Walmart has no business being in the sustainable realm, because part of sustainable, as you mentioned earlier, is not just about making sure that the vegetables are being grown in an organic fashion, but really who's growing them? Are they being paid a fair living wage? Are the people that are producing this stuff, are the people that are selling this stuff in the restaurant, are they being paid a fair wage? So sustainability has to go beyond just the product that you're picking up, but really the definition of sustainability has to get much wider, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation.
I would tell you right now that Whole Foods' sustainability program with regard to purchasing is probably as good as any that's out there, including the humane treatment of the workers from which they buy. They have a very strong protocol. You disagree?
A lot of vegetables that you find in Whole Foods come from China. A large majority of the products that Whole Foods sells comes from China.
No question.
Check it out.
And no question, I agree with you. And a large amount of the overall product that they sell is commodity product too. Mm-hmm. But of the organic and the local sustainable stuff, the protocols that they have in place are pretty rigid.
Well, I think this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to say that, my God, we can't be perfect. I mean, just be happy that we have actually big companies like Walmart or Costco.
Nora, we need to talk.
I love it, conflict on the stage.
That want to provide healthy food to the masses. The biggest criticism is always that money. Organic food, local food, seasonal food is unaffordable by most people. So why not be happy that it's not perfect, but it's a little baby step in the right direction. I mean, then the people that work for Walmart and the people that work for Costco, they should get together and say, okay, you have now good food, why don't we have good wages too? I think that's the only way of doing it. You have to get grassroots, you have to get together, and I think that, I mean, I'd never shopped at Costco as Walmart, but I feel that it's better than not serving a whole big portion of our population sustainable and healthy food.
There's a place for them. Now, question, aren't you glad you stayed for this?
I'm Deborah Kimmelman-Block. I'm from Whole Foods, KOL, not Whole Foods, but it is supposed to rhyme.
You're lucky you haven't been sued yet by them.
We produce a 100% grass-fed, local, organic beef, lamb, poultry, and it's also kosher, and then we also do non-kosher. But the non-kosher we're starting to sell wholesale, and I wanted to make two comments that I think you all could help with in terms of like pricing and also making this accessible to you. One is, and I know this has been brought up by other people before, but of course, purchasing the whole animal. And I'd love to hear your comments on that. But the other is, and I think this is probably even much more easy than buying the whole animal, is buying it frozen and not fresh. And I have come up with a lot of issues specifically with restaurateurs who want it fresh, fresh, fresh. And when you're coming from a small producer to have like this much of one cut and have it be fresh and every week and all that is really, really impossible and makes it very expensive, and it makes it probably too expensive for you. However, at the same time, so I know that there's a quality issue that I get, I hear from restaurateurs a lot. But my personal experience with like flash freezing and I mainly sell retail direct to customers, I don't hear a problem with it. The biggest problem I hear is that it's a pain to defrost. But, I mean, considering the logistical issues around selling fresh versus frozen, like that doesn't seem a big enough issue to really combat, especially with how well frozen meat is quality-wise today.
Todd, where are you on fresh versus frozen?
Well, it's interesting because I had a small farmer call me and said I had she had two small lambs. It's a small scenario, but it goes exactly with what you were talking about, and she had 2 lambs. So I have 2 lambs with the frozen. Would you want them, or do you want to wait for the fresh ones in December? I said, I'll wait till December. And I've used a lot of great frozen product. I think in the end, if the meat comes back and it shows well and it eats well, I mean, we prefer to use fresh product. I mean, we don't like to see any tissue or any damage on the meat when it's frozen. I know that there's great techniques. I think it's probably in the the thawing process as well. But for us, I mean, depending on the platform that you're on and depending on the prices that you're charging, you want to serve people the best possible quality product you can do. And fresh is better than frozen. That's my experience. I could be wrong, I'm sure, but that's what I believe.
I think that as an operator, there's another level of there's another step involved. There's two more steps involved. There's the freezing at the plant and how is that handled, and then there's the handling of the frozen product in the delivery process, and then there's the receiving and handling of the product in your facility, and then you have to slack it out in a proper fashion. And there's trade-offs. If I could buy my beef or could only get my ground beef in a frozen state, I might give it some consideration. But there's so many ways for it to go wrong, I think that,
But I thought it comes back to having a relationship.
Sure.
Because if you as the farmer make relationships with chefs or buyers or grocers or whoever, that they promise they're going to take your product, there shouldn't be any reason to freeze it. And then that's where distribution comes in. And a lot of times it's not possible to go farm direct, and you need a distributor so that the meat can be picked up as quickly as it's processed and gotten to the end user. So that just illustrates more the example of or the reasons why having a good relationship with 10 or 15 chefs within your area that will take your meat, that have promised to take your meat, they know what they're going to get, primal cuts, subprimal cuts, the whole animal. That's why all the more reason to have a relationship with the same restaurateurs, chefs, or grocery stores to ensure that your product can stay fresh and skip one step of going into the freezer.
Michael?
And this goes back to what we chatted about a little bit earlier, and I think your fourth point on sustainability is the broader definition of sustainability, sustaining the community, sustaining the workforce, sustaining our world, really. And that's the role that organizations like DC Central Kitchen can play. And to limited degrees, we've worked with everyone up here and many other folks, including processing houses that are here today, to buy, again, that other product, the piece of the animals that needs to be frozen now, or we're going to freeze, and when we get to 2,000 pounds, we'll come out and pick it up and pay for it. But what we're trying to do in working with folks like the folks that are up here is to create ways to make their business their philanthropy. So to get out of this idea of having to put charity over here and business over here and all the different pockets of business over here, to make this group understand that there are ways that we can work together. And that there are ways, to his credit, Andy was signed up for this crazy idea I had about non-large eggs. And it's a great story, I'll tell you some other time. But we just couldn't handle, we didn't have a place to keep all these eggs until the day we could get them from the farm and the day Andy wanted them. So we needed to build another place to do that. Now we've just finished that other place. So hopefully now we'll get back on board with Andy and some of these other folks on buying non-large eggs that we're going to get from farms down in the Shenandoah or wherever. But the only thing Andy's doing to be philanthropic at that point is buying eggs. That's it. He's not giving us 10 cents off a dessert or 25 cents off an entree. He's buying eggs. Now, he might pay a little more than if he was buying eggs from Cisco, but he's buying good eggs, local, free-range, cage-free, really, eggs, that is helping us further our mission. So those are the answers to those questions. There's an unlimited number of opportunities and possibilities out there if, again, we're thinking like this.
Just one slight sort of correction is that I don't think of it as philanthropy. I don't think that's the way it should be looked at. I think for us to look at the world as we are connected to the world as well, as part of our world and our community and our people and so on, I think it's not seen as philanthropy. I think it's seen as the only way to do business. And I'd like to see that really happen more and more. But I wanted to sort of address the freezing part of the question. We don't, when we build our restaurants, we don't put a freezer in. We have one single freezer about the size of this table, and that's about it. And I'm a biologist, and you would never think of serving a frozen head of lettuce. If you freeze lettuce, you see the damage that it creates. It's less noticeable with muscle, with meat, but the same damage to the cells happens. I don't know of a way that does not damage the cells of the product that you can freeze, you know, in a traditional way. I know the flash freezing and all of that stuff, but still there's quite a bit of damage that happens in the process that it changes the product at the end.
I spent a long time in the steakhouse business, and I can tell you we did a lot of testing because it was significantly less expensive to buy frozen meat. But in every case, the flavor wasn't that different, but there's a huge difference in texture, and I think it's got to do with what Andy just said.
Yeah, but I think now, as you said before, now the flash freezing made a big, big difference. Makes a big difference how you freeze it. You can see it in the fish. Yep. Most of the fish that's flash frozen on boats already killed, immediately fresh frozen. It's a fresher product and it's much better. I mean, it's not perfect, but as I was saying before, nothing is perfect. But for instance, our farmer, he has to drive like, I don't know how many hours, 2 hours, 3 hours with his animals to the slaughterhouse. There are hardly any slaughterhouses anymore. So he cannot drive every week with one little animal. He has to wait until he has 5 or 6 or whatever, how much his truck takes or his van, and he brings 5 or 6 animals to the slaughterhouse to have them processed. Well, I cannot take 5 wheels, so of course he has to freeze it. And so I deal a lot with frozen product. It's not perfect, I can tell you, it's not perfect. Sometimes I think for grass-fed, it's a blessing because the fiber is broken down.
And she's only been doing it for 30 years, so there must be something right going on there. All right, I want to move along to my second question for the panel, believe it or not. This is the fun part. I'm going to ask each of you. This is horror stories for 20 points. The question for the panel is, because there's so many great stories in the restaurant business, there really are. You could just go for hours. Give us a horror story regarding purchase or use of sustainable meat, vegetable, protein, or unsus. Just give us a restaurant horror story. Andy, you've got a smile on your face. You want to start off?
I think Michael wants to start with that one.
All right. Good.
Most of our horror stories have to do with employee misbehavior.
Exactly. That's more fun to talk about.
Okay, enlighten us. Go for it.
Drama.
No, I mean, you know, the typical situation, the problem, it's not a horror story, but the problem with sourcing these products is, you know, unreliable supply, distribution problems. You know, we've had several farmers that we really, really like. We try to use them at multiple restaurants, and they won't drive the extra mile down the road to make that next delivery. They just have a mental block about it. Won't do it.
Because it's traffic in Washington.
Yeah.
Well, my horror story is with Mike and Michael about the extra large eggs. Michael called me. He says, I've got some cage-free eggs, amazing care-free, organic cage-free eggs, extra large, just slightly higher than the price you're paying now for regular eggs. And I thought, sounds really too good to be true. So it turns out that if you actually extra large eggs are cheaper than large eggs because they're not standard. Isn't that interesting? Even though you get more egg. So we use them to scramble, so it really doesn't matter, you know. So we're trying to make this arrangement happen, and it became an issue of distribution. So I convinced my staff that Michael is for real, that this is really going to happen. Because, you know, when you are running a restaurant that serves 1,000 brunches a day, you want to make sure your eggs are there, because if they're not, you're really in trouble. So we ended up, you know, it was supposed to be a delivery on Friday. So the short story is we ended up getting it, but it was a lot of sweat, guts, and tears that happened along the way in order to get it, because they delivered to one location. We needed all locations. So I had my staff picking up eggs on crates, taking them in their cars, and taking them to the different locations along with their driver. It was a fun experience, I thought.
But the beauty of the story.
The beauty of the story
is, and I tell this story too because it's a really good example, I think, of I guess a classic mistake that I made, or DC Central Kitchen makes, or a lot of people make, is the theory is great, but we didn't have the practice down yet. And I was thinking to myself, oh, if we got this idea, just putting it into practice, that's the easy part. You know, we've already figured out this crazy thing that you know, 3/4 of the eggs that are laid are non-standard and are basically thrown out. So we figured, okay, here's a great way to get these eggs, get them out of landfills, and get them into places that can use them. But we hadn't figured it all out. So I spent 3 years building a 6,000 square foot facility just to keep Andy happy. Now, he doesn't mention that part.
So all well that ends well. That's wonderful. See the horrors come around.
Horror story time?
Horror story. I don't know. 150 employees, that's a horror story.
Try 500.
I don't think it's not a horror story. I mean, it's just, I think it's more of a hard story. I think that everything we're talking about is just, it's work. I mean, it's work. I mean, I was thinking about listening to all this, and I was thinking, oh, it'd be a horror story. And I think, oh yeah, the time I used to drive out by myself in my car up into near West Virginia every other week to pick up 500 pounds of meat.
Got blood in the car.
And drive it back myself from the slaughterhouse and bring it back to the restaurant. Everybody's always too busy, so I got to put it in the fridge. I got to. That's a hard story. I mean, but that's what we do in order to go to these lengths to make these things happen for people, because that's how it has to happen.
I think it's what we all. My horror story is we go through about 250 pounds of burger on a Friday at my Pogue Mahomes, and I got to tell you what a horror story is when you're trying to hand patty 250 pounds, 500 burgers on a Friday, and your delivery comes in at 11:45. You know you are FUBAR. It is tough.
Well, I don't know if this is so much of a horror story. It's an eye-opening experience. Opening up in a Hilton Garden Inn in Washington, D.C., and being the first independently owned and operated restaurant inside such a huge national brand is, you know, we were all hippy-dippy about it, like, let's make it access for everyone, great food, and all these people traveling to a Hilton, the families, the business people. When you look at what they demand for $12.95 for breakfast, this is the eye-opening experience that you have because, you know, Equinox is somewhat of a little higher price point, you know, than what you can have. And our sensibilities of equal access for all. This is why we wanted to go into this neighborhood, into this hotel. We have ideas that, you know, this kind of food should be available at all price levels. And it was very eye-opening to see what they expect to be on a breakfast buffet, all you can eat, you know, for $12.95. And you, as the owner-operator, have to say, okay, are we going to use powdered eggs? Really? No. So we've
it's that
had
bagel sandwich with 17 strips of bacon on it that screws you, right?
You are constantly, now that we're in this big model picture for all the hard time we've gotten about it, we still feel very strongly about what we're doing, that we want to make this work. We did raise breakfast to $14.95 because I just couldn't take the $12.95 thing anymore. But, you know, I think that people in the you know, the much bigger, what we're doing at the Hilton represents a big market share as opposed to Equinox, which is sort of at the top of the dining pyramid. I think as restaurateurs, we have to recognize that there is price levels out there, but you have to find the way to make it work, not just for the foodie elite that can afford to eat $60, $70 meal. You have to make this available to people who want to wake up on a Sunday morning and not spend a lot of money, and they have their kids and they want to go to a breakfast buffet.
Are you making local and sustainable product available at that price point?
I wouldn't say every single thing. And look, we still buy from Cisco. I spend a lot of my
don't we all?
Life there, right? I don't want to. If anybody's here from Cisco,
stockholders actually.
I know. I think that they have very much a purpose, and distributors have very much a purpose. But we are slowly making this happen at Watershed. It's not easy. You can take a lot of flack for food consistencies. A critic can walk in any day of the week and say, well, it tasted different on Tuesday than it did on here. Well, we as a chef and a restaurateur, we have to try different products, and it doesn't happen overnight. This is a serious process. So we're taking a little heat for it in the meantime, but that's okay because 5 years later we'll figure it out. But so yes, the product mix is changing, and it's difficult.
Anybody horror stories? Quick. You must have 100.
It's actually a heartwarming story in some ways. But several years ago, I was looking for a bison producer in Virginia, and I drove out to this family-run bison farm and went and visited the family, and they had just were rebuilding their farmhouse and were all living in a one-room building. There were like 7 kids and the parents, and the pigs had broken out of the sty and were living on the front porch. And so I go visit them, and they're just a really wonderful family. We had a great afternoon. Their bison product was great, and I really wanted to buy from them because I knew it would help them, it would help my restaurant. And I called them week after week for months and never heard anything from them. And then finally, 5 months later, I get a call, okay, we're gonna deliver 1,600 pounds of bison to you tomorrow. I was like, what am I gonna do with 1,600 pounds of bison? But
Got a freezer?
the big one, right? It's just, you know, this is where there's a disconnect between the producers and the restaurants, is that what are we gonna do with 1,600 pounds of bison all at once? So, you know, it didn't work. And then I said to them, well, okay, that'll last me X number of weeks. When will you have your next shipment? Oh, another 6 months from now. And so you're kind of lost because they're just not connecting to what you do as a restaurant.
Sure. Anybody? Yes, sir. Our veterinarian, our resident vet.
I kind of have a cute horror story or warming story about our veal that we deliver. We produce meadow veal or rose veal, and most of the time it's delivered in sides. And the chefs are quite anxious to get all the offal, you know, the liver, the heart, the tongue, the sweetbread, and so forth. And that usually comes in a box separate from the sides. So I delivered to this new restaurant. I won't mention the name. And the offal was in the box, and he wanted to see it. Well, the chef didn't come out. The owner came out to meet me. And so we opened up the box, and the first thing he sees is the complete skinned head of this calf, eyeballs and all. So that was a real eye-opener, sorry for the pun, but a cute moment. That was a little bit embarrassing because he did not want the head. I had to take that back.
Good thing the owner wasn't a woman.
No, the owner was unaware.
My wife just can't stand a head-on fish. Or oh, take it away, screaming. Okay.
How can you say that? It has the most gelatin in it. It's the best thing for
I'm not my
I was
wife.
gonna say, you can tell that certainly wasn't me. I would have made you hang around for a while. I've kept that head and done all kinds of different stuff. I don't know what his problem was.
Yeah, right, there you go. There you go.
He needs to get a little thicker skin, that cook.
Any other questions out here while we're fooling around? All right, next question I've got is, excuse me, we're just, nobody knows where the hell we are in this recession. We've just been through 2 terrible years of recession. What impact has the recession had on your thinking as restaurateurs about purchasing sustainable animal proteins? Have you plowed through? Have you made changes? If so, how's the recession impacted your decision-making process about sustainable proteins? Michael?
Yes, Michael?
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because the kitchen is coming at this from a little different perspective than the rest of these folks up here. But we still buy a lot of food. We buy a significant amount of food. But we also rely on, not necessarily for the school food and catering, but we rely on a lot of donations. And as I said earlier, one of the things that we're seeing in this recession is donations, charity, that kind of stuff is declining. So this recession, if you will, has actually inspired and moved us farther in the direction of creating relationships where we can get a lot of good product locally. So in essence, by buying a lot of seconds, and then developing relationships with these growers where we're buying primes and firsts and moving on to proteins and dairy, we've created almost our own commodity market. And what we found is, very, I guess, antithetical to thinking is that we found that we can do our business in the schools better using local product than we can using USDA commodities. USDA commodities would actually cost us money. We would lose more money by using that product as opposed to taking advantage of the arrangements we've made with local growers and producers. So for us, it's really pushed us this other way. And these relationships have done amazing things. Now, again, we have an advantage as being a nonprofit and doing the work that we do than a lot of other restaurants. You know, I understand that.
Sure.
So there's a bit of an apples and oranges situation here. But it has absolutely moved us farther in the direction of buying local, relying on that as our product stream for the future.
Interesting.
Well, you know, that speaking of primal cuts and using the whole animal and things like that, I also used to work for another meat distributor called D'Artagnan. And Cervena venison, while it's in New Zealand, did something very, very interesting and economical. While, you know, the prime cuts, the center cuts of the animal cost the most money, they created, using chefs like Todd and other chefs around the country, an entire market for what otherwise would have been a piece of meat that would never be used for anything, maybe dog food. And it was called the Denver leg. It's a Denver leg of venison that everybody wanted, because venison was, well, this was back a while ago, such a gamey animal. They created, enlisting chefs. They brought us to New Zealand. We toured the farms. I mean, but these chefs around the country created a Denver leg network, if you will, and got this meat that was $3 a pound cheaper than the primal cuts. And this is economic times call for creativity. It's the mother of invention. And you find a way to utilize the not so sexy parts of an animal that are cheaper to produce but come from the same, you know, humanely raised, sustainable, all those buzzwords you want to use. But I think that creativity can drive yourself through economic times like this, and having ingenuitive chefs that create great dishes with always not being a center cut loin, you know, that they can use a Denver leg. Consequently, now it's one of the best-selling parts of Cervena venison is the Denver leg, and it's a marketing push that lasted for 10, 15 years now. So I think learning to be creative with all cuts of meat and proteins is the way to get through recessionary
Are you
times.
putting lesser cuts, I'm saying other than middle meats, are you utilizing that at Occidental?
No, I mean, you know, I think whole animal usage is key. I think this was always something about this, for all the years we've been talking about this, utilizing the whole animal, and that's just being a practice that is good for the farmer, it's good for us. Can you take this, can you take that, let's take the whole thing, we'll use the front and we grind it and make the burger. And you know, we find ourselves now, you know, trying to do trios. You know, you use a piece of a leg, you use a piece of a loin, you make some sausage with the shoulder. I don't think it's something that we've done because of the recession. I think it's something you do as a part of your craft, as part of the responsibility you have as a chef to use the whole animal and to teach people and to show people that the whole animal is just as good as the rack or whatever that is. So we've always done it and we'll continue to do it in recession or no recession.
Isn't there a certain level of consumer education that has to take place on some of these different cuts, though?
Well, sure.
Veal head's not the most popular dish in Chicago.
What's that, veal?
The veal head.
Well, you don't call it that.
Oh, what do we?
Right. But, well, I mean, sweetbread, I mean, look, you know, organ meats offal meats are, by most people, for food lovers standards, those are the go-to. I mean, that's, if you're a gourmet, that's like, hey, the sweetbread, you know?
Right, sure.
Oh, it's just loins. You know, you want to do something creative. I mean, Nora, sure you can speak on some of this. I mean, those secondary cuts are what makes a great cook. I mean, that's what separates good cooks from average cooks. Yep. Anybody can cook veal, loin, and rack. It's take that head, take those organ meats, and show me what you can do.
You know, when I started out 30 years ago, I had to buy whole animals. And I think what people are not aware that when you have to buy a beef, it's 1,200 pounds, and 900 pounds are ground meat. I thought about opening a restaurant chain called the Ground Hog because I had so much ground meat each time. But you get very creative. You get, as Todd was saying, you get very creative, and you realize that actually most countries have, you know, their national dish is a ground meat dish. You know, like the Swedish meatball, like a meatloaf, like, you know, the hamburger in this country. I mean, you have, so you can always use it up. But what I wanted to say about the recession is that I have lived through one already. I think I will live through this one too.
Anybody else on impact?
I think, you know, once you go down this path of committing to a sustainable, you know, food sourcing and all this, I don't think it's possible to sort of turn back. I think once you go down this road, I think, like somebody said, the recession, I think, helps restaurants to be smarter. I think restaurants tend to be kind of, when things are going well, they tend to be the most wasteful, the most, you know, really, I mean, from an economic perspective, they sort of lose control. And oftentimes the consumer ends up paying because they're willing to pay higher prices. Once the consumer starts tightening up their pocketbooks, that forces the restaurant to become much more aware of you know, waste, how they get the product, how to use the product, and so on. So I think it's actually been, in many ways, a very positive thing for the industry, because it really was getting out of control, and there were just too much going on and really not very good quality out there. I think it's not a bad thing.
I'd say, you know, well, one thing is, I think we're all fortunate to be in the Washington, D.C. market. The economy has not hit us the way that it has, you know, most parts of the country.
Government never shrinks, does it?
You know, when times are bad,
Depends.
maybe spend more money. But I think, and you know, I don't have any evidence to back this up, but as Mike was saying, obviously commodity prices have been going through the roof for a combination of reasons that are hard to track at times. And I've wondered, I mean, once you're already in the local food, the sustainable food niche, then you're already acclimated to a pretty high price. I think my guess would be, if there was some way to actually calculate sort of a bellwether small farm in this area price, I don't know, you couldn't do it, but that those prices have stayed pretty stable. And we've seen the other, you know, the staple goods really go through the roof. So in some ways, I think we're in a good place. You know, the people who are doing this kind of food overall.
Thank you. Very quickly, any questions to wrap it up? Yes, ma'am. Coming your way. You're a quiet speaker. There you go.
I just wanted to say I'm Molly Peterson. I'm with Flavor Magazine. I'm also with Mount Vernon Farm. My husband and I manage a farm. And as restaurant owners, I want to thank you for taking that step, because I know if I'm going to go to a restaurant, and let me tell you, I don't make a lot of money, but if I'm going to go to a restaurant, if I'm going to go, I will choose a restaurant that sources locally. And I'll choose it for a few reasons, one of which, I know it'll taste really good. I know that I can trust those restaurant owners and the chefs because I know that they took the time to source that, and they know their farmer. And I also know if I see a farmer's name on that menu, I'm so proud because I know them. I can go to their farm and I can ask their questions. So as a consumer and as a farmer, I want to thank you for being leaders in this movement, because we all need to do this together. It will take consumers, it will take restaurant owners, it will take distributors, it'll take everybody, but we all have to support each other. So, not really a question, more of a thank you.
I can't top that. A great way to wind it up. Thank you very much, panel. I appreciate it.